Post. Post. And last one. Posting here. And you should have people trickling in. Hello, hello. Okay, seems to be live.
Hello.
Hello. Oh no. Oop. I had it on so I was hearing myself. There we go. No messages yet, it's sad. Oh, there we go.
It's sad.
Snop it. The answer to that one is a shploop. I'm gonna mark it as answered. So hello, Grant. Hello everyone. People should be piling in. How's everyone doing today? How's Saturday?
I hope you all... Oh, how am I doing?
Yes.
Oh, I'm eating... I am as eating cereal as I'll ever be right now.
I literally inhaled lunch before this. I was like... I was playing a game, and I was like, oh, like, I should start preparing for a stream, but I'm hungry, it's gonna be 2 hours. So I heated lunch, and as I'm heating the lunch, I'm prepping stuff, and then I'm like, shoving into my mouth. And then, like, I get on here, and my controller's not working, so I'm like, I guess I need to restart, and like, I had to speedrun the setup again. But we kinda made it.
I was kind of similar. I woke up and I was like, man, I'm tired. And then like I like took my meds and I like played on my phone for like an hour, and then an hour passes and I'm like, oh my god, it's like 30 minutes before the stream. And then I get up and I go brush my teeth and I get my Fruit Loops, and I'm a tornado of chaos. Yeah, I mean Fruit Loops.
We'll see what the chat is gonna be. Tornado of chaos today. Let's see how many questions we get and how many interesting ones. I simplified the setup today, so like we're right in front of the board, so if there's anything, you know, that requires drawing diagrams, it's like right there.
Yeah, we just magnetize to the board.
Yeah, we just go and we're there. Ground says he's got to get a silly question. Oh, that was the schnoppet thing. I don't know how to answer it, but I don't know what that means. And we should get a good amount of people in today. So hello everyone, welcome to the Resonance. I kind of stopped tracking which episode it is. I think it's like 10th or something, but what it is, it's like my office hours combined with like a podcast, so you can ask any question you want about Resonite. We'll do the best to our ability to answer those questions. Some of them we might just give like a general overview and like, you know, ask you to bring it to other office hours, like especially for example if it's like some moderation matter. The moderation team, they're holding office hours like an hour and a half before this one, so like some of you probably came from there. And in case you missed it, you know, there's gonna be another one next week. But yeah, like whatever you want to ask about the Resonite, like whether it's technical, whether it's like, you know, how the platform's going, like what's its history, what's its future, like what are we doing on the team, like anything related to Resonite, like feel free to ask. The one thing, make sure you put a question mark at the end of the question. That way, like it pops out on our thing and we don't lose the track of it. If you do ask some follow-up questions or follow-up like clarifications, please include the context in the message, because sometimes it takes a bit to get to your follow-up, and by the time like we forgot like what the original question was. So with that, like we should be ready to start it. Also, some of the questions, like, you know, we might end up like talking about. We might end up like, you know, talking like a little bit deeper into stuff and kind of rambling about it, depending on how time goes. And also, I forgot, like, we have a Cyro, or one of our people from engineering team here as well, so he's kind of here to help me like answer some questions, especially the related ones.
I forgot about me too, don't worry. I also found that schnoppet doesn't seem to really mean anything, but has gained the colloquial meaning of to suddenly disintegrate at the thought of something.
Oh my god. What would be a thought of something that would make us suddenly disintegrate? Oh, it's a Tom's
I guess, oh, I know what I disintegrate at sometimes. I disintegrate at the thought of ref hacking when people are like,
Yes.
I'm gonna put ref hacking in this thing and I'm gonna make it public and then I'm gonna share it around and then I'm gonna drink your tears when you cry when it breaks.
Oh my, that's some. I don't know if it's dark or like that, but that's. Yes.
Y'all better look out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like ref hacking is like one of those things where it's like we generally like with Resonite, we have like this like philosophy of like it's platform for thinkers. So if you were like thinker, then tinker away, play around with things and explore. But also you should understand the impact of some things and some features. They are designed to be supported for long term, which means if you use those features for their intended purpose, we give you certain guarantees that your stuff is not gonna break, and if it does break, then we're gonna spend some time fixing it. But there's like other things where a lot of them also will tell you specifically don't do this. This is you're kind of exploiting an implementation quirk, or you're trying to get around some things, and those bits can change, and oftentimes they will change without warning because we might change one system and it ends up influencing how some other system behaves, and the outward behavior of the design parts stays the same, but how they work under the hood might change, and if you depend on how they work under the hood, your stuff will explode. And in those cases we will not necessarily spend the time fixing that because we're this is something we don't intend to keep working the way it is, and you shouldn't be relying on it. So if you want to tinker, play with it, you're free to do so. We're not gonna forbid it, but at the same time you need to understand the risks that come along with it. And we also appreciate if you talk about it with other people, that you share those risks with others so you know what to expect. Because it's one of those things, you feel like it's fine and then it breaks, and if you have some toolset or workflow that's built upon it, and suddenly that goes spoof, we might not be because we have other kind of priorities at a time, we might not make proper replacements for whatever you're using it for, which means you might be left without a solution, or might end up being scrambling and so on. So as long as we understand that's a risk of what you're doing, I feel it's fine. But the problem is oftentimes people don't talk about the risks of it, or don't really understand them, and then then they get upset that when stuff breaks. So the best thing is just stay informed about things, know what's good practices, what are tricks to be avoided. We do have a section on the wiki that actually says things to avoid, that specifically calls out some of these things and tells you these are risky things to use. These are not gonna, this can explode at you at any moment without a valid replacement for whatever you were trying to do. So just keep it in mind, as you kind of play and build systems.
Yeah, basically if you use something ref hacking your creation and it breaks one day, we're probably not gonna auto upgrade it for you.
Yeah. A lot of times we also can't, because sometimes whether you depend on the specifics, how certain system works. If we wanted to keep that, we would essentially be locked to how that particular system functions, and doing that that essentially ties our hands to upgrading those systems and improving them, or even optimizing them. One actual example I can give is people used to, or maybe they still do, I don't actually know. They used to parse the reference IDs to figure out the user. And the way it works is because the reference IDs right now, they're kind of partitioned where 8 bits of it are for the allocation ID of whichever user, and they would parse it out to figure out a user that allocated an item. The problem is that's an implementation detail. The reference IDs, they're meant to be opaque, which means it's just an identifier, but it doesn't necessarily tell you more on itself. Its structure is subject to change. So if you build something that assumes those 8 bits are the user, and then we change how it's represented, which we actually will in the future, because it being 8 bits, that limits it to 256 users, or 55, I forget, was one of. But like once we do like, the big server things, like where we can do domains and so on, there might be a lot more users and the allocation might be more dynamic. It might, not even have like allocated part of it, like to be specifically the user. It might do system where there's like an allocation manager and like, other things, and it becomes more complicated, and suddenly the system you built is not gonna work and it's just gonna break on. One thing we actually did in this particular case, because we saw you want to figure out which user allocated something, we made a node, which like where you plug, I think you plug, what does it take? Like the word element, I think. You plug a word element and it tells you this is the allocating user. What this does is because the node, it kind of abstracts away. It essentially abstracts away the idea that you want to figure out which user allocated this element. So right now, internally, it'll actually use the reference IDs because that matches. Once we change that implementation, how reference IDs work, there's going to be different ways to figure out who allocated something. We can change the internals of the node so it uses the new system, but its outward behavior will not change. From your perspective, you still give it a word element and you still get the user who allocated it. You don't care what happens inside because we can upgrade inside. But if you sort of build a system yourself where you parse it out and figure out the user that way, there's not really a reasonable way for us to upgrade that system for you. And that's kind of, the general principle we try to ask people is like, if you're abusing something, for something that's not necessarily its intended purpose, it's better ask for this to be a feature, we'll look into it and see, like, sometimes we will tell you like, oh, you can actually already use this system, this is intended for this. But if you kind of like, just try to like hack things out and so on, like that's where it should give you a pause and be like, is this like meant to like do this kind of thing? And if you make GitHub issue about it, like sometimes we'll say like, no, we actually want to introduce a system for this. This is not gonna keep working the way it is. Or, we tell you, no, you can feel free to use this system. The system is designed to be supported long term. So hopefully this kind of gives like, a better idea on like how to make things so they support it like, long term and they kind of keep working and they don't break on you.
Yeah. And I won't hold up this topic too much longer, but it was kind of funny because there's a similar parallel in the C# with what was it? It was get hash
Get a
code or
hash, yes.
something.
Yes, this is a good one.
There's a similar thing in C# where you can get the hash code of like an object or whatever, and it's kind of like at that time like a unique identifier of like what it is. But
well, it's not unique. Do you want me to tell this one?
You can tell.
So in C#, like every object implements get hash code. Which is a way to obtain like a hash, which is sort of like a fingerprint of an object. It is not really guaranteed to be unique, but it's oftentimes used, for various collection like dictionaries, hash sets and so on, is when you want to like do a quick identification. So for example, if you're storing a bunch of objects, in a dictionary and you want to have a fast lookup, one way to do it is you get a hash, and then you store object under that hash, or you store multiple. So when you then want to query object based on the key, you get a hash, you find whatever's under that hash, and there could be like, either just one object, in which case, your job is done. There could be multiple objects, in which case you have to kind of then filter them through and, figure out which one is the one you actually want. Because you can have, hash collisions. But the problem was that if you, for example, take like a piece of string, like text is your key, and you say you have the word test, and then you have the word fruit. Say the word test would end up like with a hash that's a number 7. And then the fruit would end up with a number 42. One thing the developers would do is they would actually, they would build like a dictionary, with these hashes, and they would save it. The problem is the actual number you get, the specific number, is implementation detail, and it could change at any moment unexpectedly. Which means if you as a developer, you save some data using those hashes and you assume they never change, and then they do change, your thing will explode because suddenly the numbers don't match. So in order to discourage people from doing this, what the developers of C# and core language runtime did, they actually made every time you start a C# application, those hashes are randomized. So like you will essentially get like a different one. So like on one startup for the war chest you get 7. On another startup you get 1,735 or something. It's probably gonna be more complicated numbers, but hopefully that kind of illustrates the point. And because they kind of forcefully randomize it every startup, if you were to like use it, like where you you save to your disk the pairings of like hashes with the objects, your application will break immediately on the next startup, and you realize, oh, I shouldn't have been doing that. This doesn't stay the same. I need to find a different mechanism that guarantees that it's persistent over multiple like launches and implementation changes. If they just keep it as it is, the problem is a lot of developers would not realize until they upgraded like Net Framework, to like a new major version, and then the application would break. And at that point, it's much harder to figure out like why did it even break, because like you might have implemented the thing like a year or two ago. So
yeah.
And we've kind of done something similar like with reference IDs. We kind of like scramble them a bit and so on. We make it.
Oh, your microphone died. Oh no. Well, technical difficulties, people. We'll wait for Froox to get his mic back.
Hello, this one too. I don't know my microphone's dying. It was like on the charger right before this. But yeah, like we kind of scramble it. We kind of make it harder to use them, just to like when you try to do stuff, like to give you pause and be like, is this something I'm supposed to be doing? Like it's sort of like sort of there like to tell you like this is maybe something that's hacky and like you shouldn't be relying on this.
Yeah, that's kind of why some of the like protoflux or older like Logic's colors and stuff used to get screwed up. Because some of the type colors used to rely on the hash code.
Yes.
And if you run a headless, slots would turn from green, they would be, now they're pink now. So like...
I mean, we can still use the hashes for some of them. It's just like ones that like where it doesn't matter specifically which color it is. The colors are there more just to like... So it's easier to tell just like at first like glance, but also like the colors get kind of limited because there's like thousands, if not dozens of thousands of types, and you're not gonna be able to like distinguish that many colors. So like one thing we do with that one is like some of the common types, like we assign them explicit colors, so they're very vivid and very easy to distinguish, and all the rest we just like use this system that just scrambles the colors and gives you different colors just to make it easier to like distinguish them, but like still should like check which type it is.
Yes.
Okay. It's kind of funny because like like literally we went into our first ramble, and the question was Schnoppit. That's how to pronounce it. So congratulations, Grandy. Like your meme question actually ended up like in the long ramble.
Yeah.
We're like peak efficiency today.
Yeah, we did actually also get some other questions coming in.
Yes, there's some questions piling up, but like I'm kind of like letting them pile for a bit because I feel this was an important PSA. Plus it's fun, given the original question. But yes, and TLDR. Feel free to like think around, but please be like responsible with it and make sure like you understand which systems are designed for which purposes and which ones are designed to like have long-term support and which things you will break on you. So that's pretty much it. And we should get to the questions. So the first one that's actual question is from Jack the Fox Author. I also have a good first question. Haha, joke's on you, like the actual first question was Schnoppit. It probably wasn't meant to be, but it turned out that way. But anyways, do you notice MMC in the cloud statistics? Oh, there was actually a thing like during the launch, like let me see, if you actually go to metrics, yellow document, is it metrics or, no, it's metrics.resonite.com. There was an increase of like users around like where the ceremony was happening. Let me actually grab this. This is kind of janky way, but I can just screenshot the web page in my dash and just bring it here. So you see like around here, like when it sharply increases, that's like, you know, this is around like where the opening ceremony started, and kind of stayed a little bit, and I think that it was like the normal like weekend thing. So there were like noticeable things. This is like accessible to everyone. So if you go to the URL, you know, you can like play around with these graphs yourself, and you can check for yourself. I haven't checked like the other ones like super much. It's not like if you like zoom it out a bit more, it's like not too crazy. Like out of like, you know, what we normally get on weekends. So I'd have to like poke around some more, but make sure see what I can do last 30 days. It is a bit noticeable like bump. Let me see if I can do this one. Just screenshot this. Come on. There we go. So you can kind of see like these are like usually weekends. That's like where we get most people, and this is, you know, the MMC opening. So there's definitely noticeable bump in the users. So yeah, it is noticeable. So go around, go to metrics.resonite.com. Perhaps like made this like super fancy, and play around with the graphs. Like it's kind of fun, you know, looking for insights. Next question is, do you want to read this one?
Yeah. So Game the Cop Dog asks, question for Cyro. How did you get around the issues preventing any CPU compilation? In particular, I mean, I assume you mean for the headless, just for the rest of the people watching. It actually wasn't that hard. I think I might have just been screwing something up the first time, because a while back I ended up refactoring like our whole build process to make it more like streamlined and more buildable on like other platforms, like Linux and stuff. But in doing so, since we switched to the new like project style, it kind of messed up some of the dependencies for like the headless, and I didn't know how to fix it in that moment, and so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna make this compile for like WinX64 just so that it like retains the old behavior, so that at least we have a working headless. But yeah, I think I might have just been screwing something up there, because when I changed it to compile for any CPU, it seems to work just fine now. And I'm logged in the headless, works fine, you know, doesn't crash, and I just included I ended up just, the only thing I needed to do really was just include the Steam API, like native library, and that was it in like the runtimes folder, because the headless can actually, since the headless runs on .NET, like the proper modern .NET, it can actually choose like which native libraries it needs to load for the platform it's running on. So if it's running on like ARM, it'll load all the ARM libraries. If it's running on, you know, 64-bit machine, it'll load the 64-bit libraries. If it's specifically Linux, it'll load the Linux, you know, 64-bit libraries and stuff like that. But yeah, now since it seems to work fine now, we can compile it with that in mind, and it should be much easier to make the headless run on different platforms just by giving it like the native libraries it needs. And especially if we get like ARM, you know, continuous integration, we could actually just like, you know, officially support ARM at that point.
And J4 has been like making a bunch of like PRs like recently. I haven't like been able to like look at them like in detail yet, but like it feels like they're close.
Yeah.
So shout out to J4 like for that too.
Yeah, big shout out to J4. He's been doing some great work with doing like the continuous integration on GitHub and making all the libraries build by themselves once you know, like push updates to them and whatnot. And it sure saves us a lot of headaches, so thank you so much, because oh my god, GitHub Actions are tedious sometimes.
This is one of the reasons like I don't like doing it either. You just gotta mess around with it, and like I'm like no, now we have a Cyro like on the generic thing. I'm like you go with that.
Yeah, just see, I'm here to pick up all of like I'm here to pick up like all the slop that Froox doesn't want to pick up. And then, you know, I'm I'm like, okay, Froox, I'll do this thing in like 2 days, no problem. 2 weeks later, I did it, Froox. It's done. And I'm like
It's
crawling to him,
you're
with like
dead
a
inside.
polished. I'm crawling to him with like a polished marble in my hand, but like the rest of my body is. I'm like crawling through the mud and the dirt, and no, it's actually it's fine. It's fine.
I mean,
Um,
I've actually like it's kind of funny because on my end it's like easy, like kind of better because like I'm like I give you a task and you can focus on it for like a week or two and then like I don't have to worry about like dealing with some PRs and such for a bit. I can focus on the other stuff. So like there's no complaints for me from me. It's also like the 2 weeks that I would have maybe had to spend on it, so it works out fine.
yes.
But yeah,
Anyways, yeah. I hope that answers your question, game, and
it's pretty
I hope
exciting.
that.
Like I know like people like begin the getting the like Oracle servers and everything on ARM. Actually, it's kind of funny thing because like I kind of like I've been looking for an excuse to get a Raspberry Pi because I wanted to mess with it, and like I'm like maybe I'll have less, but like I don't have really super time, but now I could maybe like get one and see what it does and just have fun with it.
Yeah,
We'll
you
see.
can. The headless is running on like .NET 8 runs so much better
Oh
than
yeah.
like the
No, it's
graphical
9.
client at this point.
9.
Not .NET 9. It's .NET 9. No, I'm out of date. I'm crusty.
Crushed it.
But yeah,
We're
it runs so much better.
yeah.
You probably could run, a little server for like 10 people off of a Pi.
Yeah. Anyways, we should move to the other questions. I don't actually know. No, there's a bunch. We should get to the questions.
Yes, yes.
I mean, we
Jesus.
got plenty of time, so we'll see. But I was a little bit worried there's gonna be not too many questions because it was quiet at the beginning, and now there's a bunch, and we're already getting into rambles. Anyways, Marta Can Art is asking, "Hello everyone. I've been exploring Resonite, and I'm loving it. How great it is so far. It's quite a lot to get through for start, but it's alright. I'd like to ask a high-level question. Why choose Source as a renderer instead of from already well-known other engines, Unreal, Blender EV, Cycles, etc.? Easier to implement, easier to license, easier to have all eyes on development." So there's actually there's like multiple things in this question, but first, like thank you. I'm like glad you enjoy like Resonite. It can definitely be like quite overwhelming at first, so like we generally just advise people like take it slow. There's a lot in here, so like it's natural to take your time, and kind of absorb everything, and there might be even parts like you might not be like super interested in. Like I know there's like people who've been here like on for like over a year, and like they're like still discovering like new stuff, so that's nothing, nothing bad. For the question of the render, there's like ones that are like more specific. So for example, for Unreal, we cannot use Unreal due to licensing, even if we wanted to. Unreal doesn't allow to build any applications that give you sort of editor functionality in the game. That's against their license, which means we cannot just use it based on that. Blender's it's licensed as GPL, which is not compatible with our code and our own dependencies, which means we also cannot use it based on that. Cycles is specifically Cycles is that's not really real-time render. That's like more like you path trace like a scene, and it can take like anywhere from a few seconds to several minutes, so it's not really suitable. And they're more high level though, like if you just consider like other engines, because there's like engines like Godot, and we had conversations, would it be like use Godot and so on. We've kind of started like we are using Unity as our rendering engine, and over the years like we just kind of run into so many issues where we we don't really have control over things because Unity is designed a certain way, and oftentimes that doesn't mesh with the things we need, because Resonite, and specifically Froox engine, they're a little bit atypical from like other games where most of Froox engine, it actually is like a game engine. It just doesn't have, it relies on some functionality to be provided by other engines. But for the most part, like, stuff that Unity is doing, we're already doing with our own engine in a sort of like different way, which allows us to, do all the sort of cool things that Resonite does, all the sort of interactivity, being able to edit anything, the implicit like networking and so on that's given the design of our own engine. So we already got like most of the engine that's our own. And what happens like with integration with Unity, that some of the bits they kind of get duplicated. That's like the same work is being done twice by both Froox engine and Unity, which decreases some like efficiency. There's some parts like we kind of bump into how Unity is designed, because like we sort of end up like with this whole like game engine within game engine, and there's just like all kinds of kind of trouble that come from that. It helps us a lot. Like I don't think if we didn't do that we wouldn't like, we probably wouldn't be able to be here right now, because it gave us like a head start. But we do want to kind of replace it with our own, because we've kind of built out like majority of Froox engine, and the renderer is like one of the last big parts that like we kind of need to replace. And by having an engine that's more designed specifically for our needs, we can make sure it fits really well with like what we need it to do, rather than sort of relying on third-party engine, where it's not necessarily designed, and it might also come with like lots of like other bits that like we don't care about, that's going to be slowing things down and bloating things up. So it's the most efficient kind of approach, is the one that gives us most control, and it also makes it like easier to like solves all the like licensing issues as well. However, Source is actually, it's not a engine that's made completely from scratch. It's being built on an existing project called Bevy, which is also a game engine, but also comes with its own renderer. So we're essentially, utilizing and wrapping like a third-party renderer, and like Gins and like other people have been kind of adding more bits to it to bring it to feature parity. So it's still kind of like using third-party project, but like one where we can adapt it like pretty well to our needs, and use it sort of like a building block. Before that, like Source was using the A-Forge framework, which is also like, it's not an engine, but it's sort of like set of building blocks to building your own like render engine. So it's not like 100% made from scratch, but it's using something where it's also like, we're not like just utilizing under a fully fledged game engine, because we already kind of have like most parts of it. So I hope this kind of answers the question. The next one is Grandy K. Quick question while I'm here. Is there any ways to get the components under known slot and the values of these components, like slot field in reference field slot, in a read and a write way? So that sounds like you want like a component access, which is something we do want to provide eventually with like Protoflex, so we can enumerate the components and access the fields. Right now there's not really official way to do it. You'd have to like preset them, set them like in advance with like dynamic variables, and stuff like that. The next question, Check the Fox author. Here's something I was discussing with some friends in game a bit ago. Do you think source engine style 3D skywalkers could have a place in Resonite? There's massive benefit of those being able to create objects that are very far away without being affected by far clipping issues. It's a system we could like look into. Like there's always like approaches and mechanisms from other engines that like we might look into adapting. So I would say so. Like I would say like it's like good to kind of create like a GitHub issue about it, and we can like discuss it a little bit more, see what the benefits are, see like how complicated it would be, and maybe like it doesn't mesh like with our approach, and we'll see like maybe there's a different way to do it. But it's definitely something we can think about. Next question is from Shadow X. Now that MMC has begun, will you wait until the end of February to discuss in spotting support? You last time said that. I don't think I said that. I was like just I was waiting because I was traveling, and I was like at FC, so like I didn't want to release it like when I was in travel, but now I'm back, so like I do want to release it pretty much as soon as I can, since it's kind of been sitting in the branch, and like it's only like a few things like fixed up, and then I need to like optimize like in memory like compression, but I'm not really planning to wait until end of February. Like I don't really see much reason for that. But yeah, like I did want to release it like over like this week, the one that's like over, but there are some other things that kind of end up popping up. So like it kind of slid like in priority because we thought I kind of deal with those, but hopefully next week. The next question is from Bucketby. I've been wondering, considering the recent implementation of Photonus to replace Unity's built-in particle system, is the eventual plan from Resonite to fully transition away from using Unity as its main engine, instead of run everything on a completely custom-built engine for sake of performance? Yes, that's pretty much like something that I've been kind of working on, because like I mentioned earlier in the stream, Resonite is already, it's like majority of it is already custom engine. Unity has been handling mostly like the rendering part, plus like a few bit with the bits. There have been like two things like recently they've been kind of like still making, for example, kind of interweaved with Unity, which is the particle system, which is now able to be removed, and the audio system, which is going to be reworked next, so we can separate out Froox engine into its own process, run it with .NET 9, which runs way faster than Mono does, which is what Unity uses, and then use Unity as essentially just a renderer. Once that's done, we also eventually replace Unity as the renderer for Source, and we're gonna have like our own kind of custom solution. We kind of evolved into this topic like in one of the previous episodes. If you go to our official YouTube channel, there's a video on how the performance upgrade is like essentially gonna work, where I kind of do a bunch of like diagrams and so on to visualize how is the change, like how is the performance upgrade gonna work. So if you're kind of interested more in this topic, I'd recommend checking that video out. It goes into a lot more detail, but yes, the gist of it is like we slowly piece by piece moving away from Unity. That's gonna help a lot with performance when we split it into a separate process, and eventually we just snip Unity out and have our own renderer. Next question is from Dusty Sprinkles. New Josh question: what is the rationale behind dynamic variable strict naming requirements? This allowing such obviously makes sense, but other than that, why anything else? One actual reason is for that is because it kind of gives us space for expansions. So for example, say we want to add new features, say like for example wildcards. I'm not saying we can add wildcards, just an example, but say like you want to do like some more complex mapping, we'll need symbols to use for that. So by not like allowing to use any of them, we can guarantee that the names are not going to contain them. If we just allowed you to use absolutely any symbols for like the dynamic variables, what would happen is then we would have like no symbols like left for the syntax, because we wouldn't know if anybody's using them or not. Because if you were just using some random symbol and like now we decided, okay, this symbol actually has this function, it's like some kind of syntax, now your stuff breaks. So it's pretty much like kind of giving us the space like for potential future upgrades. It's also like so we don't have to like deal with some of the complexities of like Unicode within those names and so on. I'm kind of running out of the questions again. Next question is from I am bad at names, K. I am currently working on setting up dozens of servers so that I may host dozens of sessions, and my friend is worried that hosting tons of worlds will be a burden on Resonite servers, kind of like DDoSing. Will this be a significant burden, or would it be alright for me to move on with my project? I don't really see it like being like super big burden, like the servers like they're kind of scalable. It depends like how many and what's happening on them, but like generally I don't think that should be a big of an issue. There's already like I think there's already like 100 like headlesses like running like at any given time. So like it probably not gonna be like super big an issue, especially if there's like not much happening on those servers as well, because like they do communicate with the cloud, for example the session information and so on, but it also depends on the level of activity on those servers. So like if there's not much happening, it's very like low, it's gonna be very low like on the amount of traffic it causes, and most of the actual like heavy traffic that's happening between your server that you set up, and like whoever's like connected to it. So like I think it should be good. You probably need like a lot more like to kind of DDoS things. The next question is from Ariane. What is the rationale for That's the same question. What is the rationale for resolving symbols other than slash in dynamic variable names? We just answered this one like earlier, so hopefully you got the answer there. The next question is Ozzy is asking, I got perhaps a bit of a sensitive question. In the past MCs, I do know you are a bit careful on possibly breaking updates. Given the next focus will be audio rework, do you think that will be delayed or released till after this month, assuming it could possibly be done this month? I'll kind of see, we'll very likely run like a pre-release on it. So like once it's kind of ready to replace things, we'll do a pre-release. Since it's like a big enough change, see, you know, how that runs. We'll ask people like, is this fine? If we see like, you know, there's not really too many issues, we might like, you know, just release it like to main. It also depends, you know, how it's gonna work out, like, you know, timeline wise. So like if it's, for example, near, you know, if we would like have to do the swap like near the end of the month when everybody's, you know, finishing their project, we might delay it, and in which case, you know, like it doesn't matter as much because like it's, you know, it's not delaying it that much. If it's sooner, you know, maybe we'll do swap then. So we'll kind of play it by ear, but like if we feel this is gonna cause issues with people's projects, we're gonna delay it. If we feel it's not, we're just gonna be, you know, informed by running a pre-release, and getting, you know, enough like kind of feedback and getting enough people to test it, we might release it. So we'll see how it ends up working out. I still haven't like, I've only been kind of like doing a little bit of like kind of research into like that, so like I don't know how long it's gonna take, like, so we'll see. Like I don't like have a timeline for it right now, but yeah, we'll do what we can, you know, to avoid like any major issues, but it's gonna depend on how things work out, whether it releases or not. Nukikun is asking, but we can still use beefing with a dot, right? I don't know what it means. Should I use that as symbol in my dynamic grandpa's names? Oh, then we can use it like if like dots are allowed to be like if it essentially uses like a whitelist system. So like the way it works, it looks for characters it specifically allows. If it sees anything else, it's just gonna be like, nope, this is the wrong name. So if you can put a symbol in there, you can use it. The next question is from Luca07. Did the legacy particle system use Unity colliders for physics? If so, does that mean moving to Photonos are we completely free from Unity's physics engine? No, it actually didn't use physics, and it was like one of the kind of, didn't use Unity's physics, I mean. It was like one of the kind of more complicated bits, and like one of the bits that made it like a weird hybrid between Froox engine and Unity. Because we are not using Unity's physics engine at all. We're using the Beppu physics engine, which is integrated directly with Froox engine. The problem is, you know, that Unity has no idea that physics engine exists. So what we had to do, whenever Unity would run, like, you know, its own simulation of all the particles, for any particle systems that had collisions enabled, we would actually read out the simulation results, then do sort of like, you know, check like how the particles moved, or like where do they want to move, and resolve collisions, you know, like just run like raycast against Beppu physics, update the particles' positions, update their velocities, and, you know, write it back into the Unity system. And what this did, you know, this kind of, it added like, you know, extra steps, like which decreased efficiency, because, you know, we have to read Unity's data out, then we have to like, you know, do sort of our own simulation mini step almost, like, you know, where we kind of like, okay, this particle has moved like this way, figure out like where it should be, recalculate everything, and write everything back. With photon dust, it just like resolves the collisions like as normal part of the simulation, so it's a little more efficient. We have a little more control. It's less kind of nasty, because we had like a thing where it kind of like plugged into like, you know, Unity's like update pipeline to make sure the collisions get resolved at the right time. Yeah, it's we haven't pretty much like. We haven't like been using Unity's physics engine at all. I think it's probably, I don't actually know if it's like disabled or we can disable it like completely, but we haven't been using any parts of it, and even the legacy system was like doing Beppu, but it was a little more kind of convoluted than is with photon dust. Let's just checking on time. Oh, still got plenty of time. Check the Froox author is asking. A bit curious architecture question I've had. Are you planning to introduce a system that will allow local hierarchies on the world data model at some point? Right now, if you, for example, have heads-up display for a certain user, it still needs to exist on the data model for all users. You can drive the enabled state locally already, but it doesn't remove the network overhead for something others will never see. So, internally, Froox engine already supports this. It's actually using that for like a lot of things that you might not even realize because, for example, any UIX, what actually happens, it creates local slots. And it sets up like, mesh renders, it sets up like, asset providers, and all things on those that are local to you because the components that are within the data model, within the data model, they are synchronized, and those components, they fully define what the state should be. Then the local ones, these components, the local ones they create, all the materials and everything, that's essentially to implement that shared state. And that doesn't need to be synchronized because everybody has the same synchronized state, for example, the UX canvas and its structure, so the render components can be pure local. Because they are pretty much like deterministically computed from that shared state. It's the similar thing, with particle system, because like what Photon does, the components, they actually set up local slots which have like, renders on them, like the actual components that like, are responsible for rendering out like, the particle buffers and so on. So there's a number of things, that kind of use it. Even things like, if you, for example, override, people's name tags. Let me just see if I can do that. So you see, like, we have like these name tags, and these are actually in the world. If you switch this, if I switch this, to custom name tags, these are actually local. Like, you will not find these in the inspector, because inspector doesn't show local slots. But it's technically an injected local slot under like, wherever the hierarchy is. So like this allows us to like show name tags that like, the user pretty much, has no control over. So it's kind of used to implement, some features where like we want to give like a local control. It creates some oddities because for anything that is local, it cannot be referenced by the data model because it doesn't exist for every user. So that kind of creates like, some kind of complexities. Like the systems that are local, they can reference things, that are in the data model, but not the other way around. And that kind of creates a little bit of complexities for interaction. You would want to provide systems to like, work with this. The problem is, like probably need to introduce like a bunch more kind of generalized mechanisms to be able to like utilize this properly. Like one use, for example, might be, say, like hosting a server for a game, and you want to have like, state of the game and logic that you want to keep hidden from everyone in the session. You can have that part be part of the local hierarchy. That way it doesn't get synchronized, but it's still affecting the synchronized parts of the data model. So that would be like, a mechanism where you have something kind of hidden, and, that never gets on the other users. But we'll need like, mechanisms to do that. For stuff like, heads-up display, it might be a little bit like trickier because like some things, like even if it's something you can potentially see, we might want to keep them like, part of the data model because there might be, other interactions with that system. Maybe you have, something on avatar that wants to reference that and so on. So instead, like in those cases, what we want to do is like introduce things like the cascading asset dependency system, which will allow us to like check, okay, like this is not enabled for this user, so we don't need to like load and update any assets within this hierarchy until it gets enabled. Because one of the things you could do is, say like you want somebody's help, maybe you need to fix up something in your HUD, and you can just, you can like unhide it and you can, start messing with it, and other people can help you with it and so on. And if it was like pure local, like you would lose like a lot of that. So the way it's probably going to work is, you're going to work on things that's part of the shared data model, and then you can decide, I'm just going to move this, the local one. I just want to don't want this to be part of like, the shared data model, but then also limits, the level of interaction you can have with it, because like even something like, like selecting local stuff with the developer tooltip, you can't do that because the developer tooltip needs to reference it. And it cannot reference it because like, you cannot reference local stuff from the shared data model stuff. So that stuff just wouldn't work. But there's probably gonna be like, mechanisms to kind of do that kind of thing in the future. We just kind of need to like formalize it and design like good ones that allow for like good workflows with this kind of thing. The next questions, Martha Khan Art is asking, I recall you've mentioned that UDIMs won't be supported anytime soon. Could you expand if you have extra time, if limited integration of, say, model with up to 10 UDIMs and only single standard shader could be supported sooner, or would it just be double the work down the line? Yeah, it's pretty much like, so right now like we're in a weird state like where we want to move away from Unity, and that's work being put into Source, which means every shader that's going to be added needs to be re-implemented later. And usually the limited integration, it just makes things more complicated, because like when you do limited implementation, you essentially cut corners. And when you cut corners, you kind of sort of bake things into like, how everything else works. Like for example, how the render works. And when you do that, it actually makes it harder to move it to another system, because like you've cut corners, in making it more generalized implementation to make it more baked in with whatever you're using at the moment, which means if you change what you're using, like, which render you're using, that actually makes it harder to like re-implement. So, yeah, it's probably, I don't think this is likely to happen. Like maybe if there's like a lot of interest in it, like if there's like, if there's a GitHub issue, we get lots of upvotes, there's like, maybe with some business use cases, we might decide to eat that cost of, implementing it now and do it. But, it depends, like, there don't need to be like significant interest in it. Otherwise, like, we're probably just gonna delay it until later. And the other keyword there is like, extra time. Like we never have extra time. It's already like, it's already like oftentimes like when it's like, at least for me, like I end up like wishing, like I'm like, I wish I had like more normal time to work on the things I'm supposed to be working, because there's things that kind of inject themselves in. And I'm like, I need to do this thing that's urgent, so I can work on this other thing that's urgent, so I can work on this thing that was supposed to be working in the first place, because now the bunch of them kind of stacked in instead. So, I think, I mean, if there's not a GitHub issue, I'd recommend like making one, seeing like if there's like a bunch of like interest in it. But right now I think it's like not super likely. At least like not until we move to the engine, because one of the things there's actually another aspect of this. One of the reasons we want to move, to custom engine is because they allow for making custom shaders. And with custom shaders, what we essentially do, instead of, us having to be like, say like, people from the community, you request, 100 different shaders that you want for different things. We could either, spend time like implementing every single one of them ourselves. And like when we implement them, then we need to support them, and we need to like, if you need changes or if things are not implemented the way you need it to move, that's additional, time we need to spend with each one of them. And we will not have time, for that many shaders. But if we invest our time into making a solution that lets you implement shaders, or, or anyone else in the community, now we kind of give you the power, to like, essentially like if you need a shader, you're not reliant on us anymore. You can just implement it yourself, or you can ask, somebody knowledgeable to do it for you, because now there's a system to just make them on your own. And that like, even though like, like it's, what's the word? Even though like it's like, bigger chunk of work to like do implement, switch to engine, implement custom shader support, in the long run, like once you consider like, the hundreds and thousands and eventually dozens of thousands of all the shaders that people could be implementing or people could want, it ends up being like, the better choice and like long term. So that's kind of like, how we kind of approach like things a lot of our times is instead of like us solving lots of individual problems, we instead of like, provide tooling to solve them generally and give like everybody in the community more power on how things work. Next question is from Grande K. Have you heard about stacked diffs as a tool to use in development? It might be something you could look at. I'm actually not sure about like stacked diffs. So do you know like what it could be talking about maybe?
Well, let me see what it looks. What are these? Let's see.
Also, I'm just gonna drink a little bit of soda because I'm getting thirsty. More. Find anything. I might hope regarding like if you could like explain a little bit more what you mean by those.
Yeah, it would help to explain like how those differ, or if they differ, or yeah, actually just what the heck are those?
Yeah, like we're familiar with this, but I don't know like exactly what stuff diffs are, and like I don't know like in what development. It says they can provide a video to watch after this, yeah, but yeah, we won't be able to answer it like during the stream. The next question is from Jack the Fox Otter. Are there any specific future plans you have for Resonite's avatar system, either new features or improvements to existing stuff? Yeah, so let's see. So this thing. Oh, that didn't spawn in the right spot. This thing. It's gonna get thrown into fire.
This thing is horrible.
Yes, it's very old. It's very like makes a lot of kind of like assumptions and things. The workflow is like not where we want to be. The thing I kind of want to do like with our avatar system is make it so it's more sort of dynamic. There's actually a few aspects to it. Like one of them is rely a lot more on heuristics because the original it wasn't really built with much heuristics, and when we try to add some heuristics, it just kind of breaks because it's kind of spread out onto multiple parts. Like there's the infamous like try to align hands, and it's just gonna oftentimes less a weird thing. It's one of those things like where the avatar is like not designed to work with heuristics, so it kind of just doesn't work right. But we have like heuristics that are part of the other systems. So what we want to do is with the new avatar system is make it like where if you want to convert something to an avatar, one, it will like for initial setup it'll just try to figure out as much as it can. So ideally you don't even need to do anything extra. We just say make this an avatar, and it figures everything. It figures everything out. The other part is we want to make it so you can redo it. So for example, if you need to adjust offsets for the hands, if for the head, you can reopen the visuals on the avatar like at any time, and do like more modifications and do more tweaks. That way, like it's not just like one-time process, but it's gonna get baked in. But like parts of that system you can sort of like reinvoke at later times. So that would be like one part of it. The other one is like once we also work the IK, making so you can for example select the bones. If it doesn't figure the bones out during the import, like you can just say like this is the this is the hip bone, this is the spine bone, this is this bone, so you can fix things up and kind of change them at later time too, because the IK is another component that like it needs to be sort of initialized in the setup, and then once you kind of initialize it, it's sort of baked in and it's kind of hard to change, so that'd be like another thing to change. So yeah, like there's like a bunch of things. I mean, there's probably a bunch of other stuff too, like just generally, because the avatar creator, like it's not a single thing. There's like multiple systems. One of them is just importing the mesh in the first place, which is its own system, it has its own heuristics. Then there's when you actually make it into an avatar, where it kind of instructs it with things and sets up all the slots and components and everything. So part of it will be kind of like unifying some of that too.
Yeah, just like the whole import pipeline in general is a little old and cobwebby still.
Yeah, we're gonna like replace like it's actually one of the things, because there was a question like last week about open sourcing, and one of the things I want to do with import pipeline is make it more modular. So instead of it's just gonna, because right now it's kind of like this kind of big function that like decides which type of asset it is, and then it triggers various importers. But also like all the import functionality is sort of like baked into the engine, like it's gotta compile with it. What I want to do is instead provide an interface for generally specifying importers and exporters. So like and like which then hook into the generalized system, which is gonna invoke those, and it'll make it much more easier to like add more importers, and more exporters to the system. We'll also be able to separate out of the code base and open source these, so you can look at how they work. You could make your own forks. You could make your own modified versions, which pretty much what forks are. You could build your own importers, add them to the system, share them with others. So just reversing that system is gonna, I think, be very beneficial. There's another thing it's gonna help with, because one of the limitations that we have is sometimes the system will try to figure out what type of asset something is, and it usually uses the combination of the header and extension. The problem is, in some cases, that's not enough. Like, for example, consider something like, a GIF. Because a GIF, it could either be a texture, when it's a static one, or it could be a video or something, when it's an animated one. Similar with, .ply, which is used for 3D meshes, but also it's used for Gaussian splits, and you need to kind of read the header and stuff to figure out what it is. But right now the system doesn't have the flexibility, because the determination of the type of asset happens before the importers even go, and then the importer is left with a choice. So what I want to do with the generalized system, make it so each importer is it has a mechanism where it can be asked, this is the data I have, is this something you're able to import? And it can do a little bit of analysis and determine, okay, maybe I can do this one, maybe I don't do this one. It's a similar thing also when you import for example some URLs, for example Blue Sky, where sometimes it imports as a video even though it's not, and it's because the importer doesn't really have that flexibility. So working it and adding that flexibility is gonna help a lot in lots of ways. Next question we have from OZ. When looking at grabbers in Flux, I noticed you can get users grabber by body node, not by chirality. Is there a future work for multiple grabbers? Yes, actually it is. It's literally there, so you can define grabbers. Well, actually there's another reason for it. It's because originally Froox engine, it used to be very controller centric, where the controller was the main node and your avatars were mostly built around controllers. And then virtual reality, it started moving towards, instead of the controller, representing your hands. And this was actually added so the system can distinguish whether the grabber is supposed to be on the controller or is supposed to be on the hand. So that was one of the design decisions, but also it allows you can just say the grabber's on the mouth if you wanna make a system where you can have a grabber and you chomp something and you grab it that way, and maybe you want it on your leg or something. So it makes it flexible. Granica is actually saying, as a bad way to describe stack div, say that you're working on feature A and finish it but can't push it yet, and you want to work on feature B, which requires feature A. Stack divs give you a workflow backed by tools to do this, so you can keep working on features and then wait for things to be merged or pushed. I mean, we kind of do this sometimes, I don't know if it's stack div, but you can essentially, with Git, I mean, because the question is like, how does that work with Git? Because like one thing we do is we we'll make a branch to work on a feature, and then it needs like another thing, so we make another branch, which allows us to kind of work on that while the thing is not pushed yet. So like it does like happen. So there's a layer on top of Git. We have to kind of explore it, but the problem is like like usually the way like for waiting things to be merged or pushed, it's not like a thing that like there's not a workarounds for it. Like we could kind of like keep working on things, but when things exist for too long on branches and there's like work on multiple branches, the problem is they get out of sync, and at some point that kind of becomes unmanageable. It also becomes like a problematic because say you need to push feature B, and because like it depends on feature A, you cannot push feature B without pushing feature A. So like like I don't think it would like really solve by that way or by this mechanism. So it kind of it gets a bit complicated. Like this is like a thing that like we kind of run into sometimes, is like where I generally when we collaborate on code prefer keep things more small, do them in phases and like merge them in as fast as possible, because if something exists on the main like in a branch for too long, it diverges, and then we have to deal with those differences and merge conflicts, and maybe like this thing is not compatible with this, and then the branch becomes a mess, and that takes time to deal with. So it's oftentimes it's not that like that you physically can't keep like working on things that way, but it's like it starts costing a lot of time, and that maybe makes it so you cannot meet deadlines for certain things, or it makes things take longer, or maybe just things become like too convoluted. It becomes harder to kind of keep all those kind of parallel things in sync and in your mind. But yeah, like we could like look at it. Like I don't like without fully understanding what it is. Like I don't know, how this would help in this kind of scenario. So we'll see. Like send the video and we'll try to have a look. The next question's from Jack the Fox Otter. One thing I'd like to see at some point is the ability for objects to save items to locate it further in the inventory on your behalf, but the biggest thing I see standing in the way there currently is not a merely mechanism for inward objects to have been trusted context between you and the object, like permissions to save on your behalf and where to save to. So there's two questions here. First, what kind of safety mechanisms for such things are you planning in the future? This is kind of tricky one. So like, it depends. So like one of the things that kind of comes to mind with this is like we want to add, as part like of the hard permission system, sort of a way to track. We want to track the sort of history of the object in a way, like who owns it. So that way, like say you have an avatar or a tool, and the tool wants to have access, to our inventory. You only want to give that access if it's something you spawn from your own inventory and you've given it the access. So we need a system to be able to say you are the user who spawned this thing, therefore it has those permissions to do those things, but only to your inventory. The problem is, people might end up doing stuff like where they spawn something, then make something spawn on your end, to try to make it look to the system like it's yours. And that's the part, like, where the hard permissions would kind of deal with that, where it would know this thing is trying to spawn something, even though it's trying to spawn it on your end. You didn't spawn the original system, therefore it doesn't, whatever it spawned doesn't have your permissions, it has permissions of like, the original user. So I think like that kind of system could help with these things, where sort of like, like some things will have like, certain privileges based on their sort of origin, in the world. And some things, maybe part of the data model says like, this is original part of the world, this has been spawned by the host, this has permissions, to do certain things. Like, for example, with hard permissions, you might be able to say, users cannot, apply force to each other. Like, you cannot, use a tool that bonks somebody unless it's something that actually came from the original world and kind of, keeps track of that. And anything else that you introduce later doesn't have those same permissions. There's still one issue with kind of system where people could make gadgets that try to utilize things that do have permissions and make them do things they want. Sort of say you made an item that allows to save the inventory, and then somebody makes something that hijacks that item and saves stuff that you didn't want to save. With that case, it's also very hard permissions would kind of help, because we can say, unless this part of the object can only be interacted, with objects that also have this origin. If anything else tries to modify it, that will either not work, it'll not allow it to make modifications, or it'll make it lose its permissions. So I think those kinds of systems would help with these. The other approach is, if something wants to save something into inventory, it essentially shows a prompt. This thing wants to save. Do you want to give it permission to save this item or not? That way the user actually has a choice, they're informed, and you cannot get around it because we'll show the dialogue in the user space. And we'll have some protection, so you cannot spam it either. Kind of like when you open hyperlinks. So that's another approach, but it does require user input to let it through. Still good on time. Second, so this is continuation. Second, do you think this could be implemented? Saving items on your behalf would open up arguably Resonite's most powerful features to be utilized by user creations inventory. Yeah, I do think it's pretty powerful thing. You could make lots of kind of systems for that, but it is one that's dangerous-ish. The other part is if say you want to save items, you could we could have a system potentially where you grant permission for the world to save the specific part of your inventory and also give it some quota size, but it also has complications because now we need to track that and so on. So it's something we could add. We'll have to think about the security implications. Usually when it comes to things like that, we tend to be cautious with it because the potential for abuse is potentially big, and if there is abuse and we need to change how the system works, that can end up breaking creations. So prefer to just kind of take it slower with those things rather than kind of rush a solution and then cause a bunch of issues. So that kind of clears out the questions we have for now. Is it time for ramble? I don't know if I have any. I had a ramble, but I forgot about it, so I don't remember what it is. Do you have a ramble? Oh, there is one thing actually that comes to mind though. I don't know if it was already announced at the moderation office hours, but one change we'll be making for all the office hours, because we kind of run these at specific times, and not everyone is able to make it into these. So if you got a question and you're not able to ask it because you're not able to be present for these live streams, what we'll do, at least for now, we'll make a post on the Discord where you can ask your questions in advance, and then when we have some free time during the office hours themselves, we'll go through those questions and get those answered. So this way, even for people who are not able to participate directly, you'll be able to ask your questions and get answers to them that way. I think this gonna help a lot of people in different time zones, or if you might be at work and stuff like that, and give access to these Q&A. So there's probably gonna be a ping after this, make the post. I don't know if moderation officers might have already done this. I'm actually not sure, but yeah, you'll see a ping. And there's certainly more questions, we still got about 45 minutes.
Yeah, just about, I think.
Do you have a ramble?
Do I have a ramble?
I have a soda. I'm gonna get more soda.
Let's see, do I have a ramble? Ah, there is one thing. Ah, we have a question.
I mean, and we could also go, like, we don't have to answer, like, right away.
True. One of the things I'm like I'm really excited about is like the ability to, gosh, I feel like a broken record whenever I say this now. I'm really excited to be able to do like shape sweeping and stuff. I
Yes.
think that is super cool. Being able to like throw a shape into the scene and like see where it hit and whatnot is really neat. It opens the door for a lot of things like,
Making systems to open doors.
yes, actually, making systems to open doors, like swinging swords and stuff and having them actually be able to properly kind of clash with like geometry, or even with each other if they both have colliders on them that you can sweep.
It gives a lot more flexibility to things. You get to, like, probe the environment and see, like, what happens, and that adds a lot more kind of interactivity.
Yeah. It's neat because you can actually give them like an angular velocity, so as they
Yeah.
proceed through the sweep, they can like tumble
Spin.
through the air. So like they're good at approximating a simple, like let's say you have a grenade, you could use a capsule sweep for that and have it like tumble through the air and like actually, if the grenade is like sideways, it's not going to hit the thing above it, and stuff like that. Gosh, it's kind of hard to explain this.
And it's also like a thing, like the physics engine in general, like internally, it uses like sweeps to figure out like collisions between things.
Yeah. I guess we do have some questions now.
We have questions, rambles over. I mean, this one's kind
Yeah.
of rambly too, because uh, Marta Canard, I'm also not sure if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, sorry if I'm not, is asking, what's your dream feature you'd love to implement, but for one reason or another is not yet possible? I mean, there's a bunch. I would actually, the one, I'm gonna say custom shaders, because, like, we kind of talked about it, so it's kind of fresh on the mind, because I feel it's one of those things that's, gonna be really fun, because, you suddenly have, like, full control over visuals, and you have the power of the GPU, to accelerate it. So, if you're familiar with the website called Shader Toy, it's like this thing, where it's this kind of thing, where you can essentially just make, like, all kinds of shaders to do, like, remarching stuff and cool visuals, and can share with the community and can play with them and see their code. And I kind of expect, something similar-ish happening here, like, once we have that, when people, like, just make all kinds of, crazy visuals that are, super smooth, because they're, like, GPU accelerated and everything. But right now it's not really possible, because, we're still kind of tied, to Unity. But eventually it will be. So it's also like, I mean, it can also depends, like, what do you mean by not possible? Because, like, some things are not possible because we don't have time for them right now. Some are not possible because we need, some prerequisites and so on. So there's a lot of things. I have to, like, kind of think about, like, the others. Like, it also depends what would be, like, the dream feature, because there's just a lot of features I really want us to have, but it just takes time. the rigid body physics is actually another one that's gonna, but this gonna become like easier like once we do the switch to .NET 9 because this gonna give us a lot of like big performance boost. We're gonna sync up with latest Beppu, so it kind of puts it back on plate of possibilities. But yeah, there's a bunch. Oh, one I kind of like want to do is like once happens with the separation, I've kind of talked about this. Is like where you could run part of Resonite as an overlay. So you could actually, have your dash, be on top of other games, for example, like VR Chat or, Minecraft in VR, like with Vivecraft and other VR games, and create sort of interactions with, other bits. Actually, if we go even further, I would say like having Resonite for augmented reality, because there's not really much commercial available, like, augmented reality hardware. So imagine like, imagine you have something like this, you have like a brush. And this brush, is already developed, it like, already does things and so on. It operates in this world, which is like a fully VR world, but it doesn't depend on it. We like, if we get Resonite on an AR hardware, you'll be able to like, spawn things like this, and just like, draw on top of like the real world. Because the brush, it's the same. It's just like, instead of like the world being like 3D, it's a pass-through, but then you have stuff that renders on top of it, including these brushes. And we already have interaction systems, we have all these complex things, so you can use tools. Same with the developer tooltip. If you have, if I grab this and I have some objects in the AI layer, I could still select them, I could edit them, I could do protoflags, all of this, all these gizmos, they can still render on top of like a real world instead of like the virtual one. So I think that's like one of the kind of dream things that I think is gonna be really fun, but that's not possible kind of due to lack of like good hardware and us not being there yet with some things. And it's gonna be a lot of fun. The other cool thing is gonna be like, with AR hardware, it's like, say you're in your room and you could actually have somebody join in their avatar. I could, for example, be in my room and just see like, Sarah joins. And because the AR headsets, they can have like a scan of the room, he can see like, approximation of my room and he can move around in it. And I'll just see him like moving around my room, looking at the things I have there, I think that could be a really cool feature, but not possible right now. Not yet. Maybe. Do you have a dream feature that's not possible yet?
I want to import 73,000 trees.
That's not that many. I think it's gonna be possible.
I guess more so like to what that's actually alluding to is I want like a proper LOD system.
Yes.
Because we do have an LOD component, which is kind of like a carbon copy of Unity's right now.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it kind of keeps all like the LODs in memory too. So like it's.
I kind of regret adding that one.
Yeah, now we gotta support it.
I'm probably gonna convert it to something. But yeah, those are dream features. I also like think about them a bit more. I'm also a bit no thank you for those right now. I have to like usually what I do is like sometimes I go to the GitHub and I'm like, okay, like these are actually I do have a thing. I have on my GitHub I have like fun features that I want to work on. So I could like literally just check that.
Thank you for subscribing, Tatsu.
Thank you, Tatsu. Yay. And yeah, Tatsu's been activated by the trees.
That's because he has a map where there's a lot of trees around, and he wants to live in a forest.
He wants to live in a forest. That's gonna be cool. There's been a systems where somebody made like where it sort of like just repositions the trees and there's fog, so like you can have like really big dense forest, but you cannot tell. But it's also like very specific system. Let me see. What was one of the things? Let me just check this. So on GitHub, I have specific board of Froox fun feel good issues, and there's a bunch. Well, some of these are like possible right away. Spatial variables, DSP, in-game vertex level mesh editing. That one, but these are kind of like technically possible. It's just question of prioritization. State machine, generic collections, generic terrain system. I talked about this one. Face tracking, general timeline system, cloud simulations. Well, all of these are kind of possible. Like this GitHub board is not for my use. they're possible. Like, you know, if I decided I'm working on this now, like, it's possible. So it's more of a prioritization thing. Anyway, let's move to the other questions. The next one are from PowderPup. How have things been going with the recent switch from asset variant system to Linux? That one actually might be better to ask like in Probable's office hours, because he's the one who's been kind of, you know, working on that one. As far as I know, like, it's working well. Like, I think he said there's like, you know, some issues to wrap up there. It's not been merged yet, like, to the main line. He's still kind of working on it, so he hasn't made like a PR for it yet, but it's probably gonna be coming soon. But yeah, I'll give you like more details. Ask in his office hours. I don't have like super much info on this one. It's very exciting though for me, because like one of the things that's been bugging me is, you know, that like on Linux we just kind of drew the compressionator library because they don't provide precompiled libraries for it. So like, you know, the Linux headless and Linux asset variant like cannot actually compute all the variants it needs to, and this is gonna bring it, you know, to the feature parity. So it is a very exciting development. The next question is from Navy 3001. How much work is there for the audio switch from Unity? So right now it's a little bit hard to estimate, because like I haven't like gotten into the full swing of it yet, but there's like a few sort of like milestones that kind of need to be hit, because I did cover this in one of the previous Resonance office hours, like, you know, the technical details of it. So there's also a video on our YouTube channel. I recommend checking that one out. You know, it has graphs and visuals and everything. Overall, I started doing some research on how, you know, to integrate with the Steam audio. And there's like several parts of the system that need to be built. One of them is having way to query the space, you know, for audio sources, which we mostly have because we're using the Beppu physics engine, and we already have like a sort of like API where we can, like, you know, register things in bounding boxes and update them and then query that, because Beppu has like very efficient algorithms for spatial queries. So I'm probably gonna, you know, adapt that, maybe generalize it a little bit more, because there's other systems I want to use it for, like spatial variables. The other part is they're gonna be building like the actual audio engine, which is like once it queries, you know, all the audio sources that are within, that could be like, you know, listened to within a specific location, then it'll need to like build a list of like, okay, these are the audio sources. It's gonna sort them by the priority. So like, you know, the ones with the highest priority are the ones gonna be playing, and if there's too many audio sources, it's gonna, you know, have a cutoff at some certain point, because it needs to limit, you know, the CPU usage on how many audio sources it can mix. And then for each of the sources, it needs to compute appropriate effects. It needs to, like, you know, it needs to sample the source audio data. It needs to apply, you know, stereo panning, spatialization, you know, other effects, reverb, other things that all need to be resolved. And then, like, it needs to mix them together to produce final audio output. So it's mostly that. I expect it to be way less work than the particle system, because the particle system in general has a lot. The audio system in comparison is relatively simple. We already have, like, you know, most of the decoding of the audio data and so on that's already done in Froox engine, so, you know, that kind of stays the way it is. And it's mostly, you know, just kind of like the resolving, you know, which audio sources are within a certain area and applying the appropriate effects. And I've been kind of playing with the Steam audio library and a wrapper for it, so I can have better feeling on how it works. So I think it's probably just a few weeks of time. We'll see how things go. Sometimes they end up like rabbit holes, but I think it's gonna be relatively fast, hopefully. We'll see. That's kind of like the gist, like, of the things that kind of need to be done. And then, like, you know, one thing that needs to also happen is like gonna decide if you're gonna pipe the final audio. Well, we're gonna pipe the final audio into Unity and have Unity output it, or if we're just gonna, use like CS core and just output it ourselves. In which case, there's like some things that I figure we need to like see, does this work properly, with Proton under Linux and so on. So like, there's things there that need to be investigated, and we'll see which ones less work or which one works better. Next question is from Jack the Fox Otter. When we get proper rigid body support, how do you plan to handle network synchronization? I feel that when it's only simulated by one and the network, it will carry lots of traffic and be somewhat choppy depending on network throughput, but simulating fully locally would open up system to desync, which kind of would not work with Froox engine design principles and also make me sad. So yeah, like usually with physics, so I don't have specific details for you right now, because like part of figuring out how exactly it's gonna be synchronized, that's part of, of working on the system. So, and because like we have not working on the system yet, like, we don't have those details. In general though, how this tends to be approached, like there's sort of like two major approaches you can use for synchronizing physics. One is using something called lockstep synchronization or lockstep simulation, where you make sure each user simulates with the exact same inputs at every, at the same rate. And you essentially sync up all the inputs between them, make sure they're all same, and you perform simulation step like locally. The problem with this is like, one, you need to make sure all the inputs are the same, which on itself is a, challenge for a lot of things. But also the simulation itself needs to be fully deterministic, which with Beppo physics, you can technically do it, but it has like additional performance costs because, multi-threading tends to be more stochastic. And also like it might not be deterministic anyways if you run it on different platforms, because different CPUs might produce slightly different values for floating point calculations, which end up accumulating over time. So we're very unlikely to gonna use this approach. The other approach is like, you still run the simulation locally on each user, and you keep synchronizing corrections. So you essentially, keep like sending the status, and usually when you encode the states of the rigid bodies, you use some mechanism, to kind of compress it. So like use stuff like quantization to like reduce, and then like use delta compression to just reduce how much data you're sending. And maybe you're not sending it, super frequently, you're just sending, corrections, because most of the time because things are already kind of synchronized, most of the time like the behavior and movement is gonna be the same. And what happens is, that you want to avoid like a drift over time. And if you just left it like that, over time it's gonna drift and the error is gonna be large, and then you're gonna see like, this inconsistent between users. But if you apply frequent enough corrections, it kind of keeps, the drift from becoming too big. So that's probably the approach we're gonna like use. But for like exact details of it, like, I can't tell you right now. That's gonna be part of the work itself. Next question. Nukikun, speaking of shaders, how does intersection material work? Is it particularly heavy to calculate, or does something simplify or accelerate it? It's actually simple math. Like, it's very efficient to compute. Like, I can actually even draw it maybe. How do you typically do like intersection? So when you are rendering something, do I have a nicer material, something brighter? Can you see this easily? Does this show on the camera well? Maybe I want my glowing one. How about this one?
I can punch in the FOV a little bit, maybe.
Hold on, that's another thing. Actually, hold on. Let me do this. I'm gonna switch it to manual. I set it up like for this board, and we haven't drawn anything the whole time. It's kind of it's ironic, isn't it?
Yes.
Anyway, so if you're doing like intersection, like, there's an easy like essentially when you think about it, when the shader runs, it's just, it's rendering pixels on your screen. So say you have like, you have some kind of object. I don't know what this is. It's some kind of blob. You have an object, and, it's composed out of like, lots of tiny pixels. So whatever GPU is doing, as it's kind of rendering, it's kind of, it's going to be computing the individual pixels on the screen. So you have something called a fragment shader, and fragment shader that's literally invoked for every single pixel on the screen that the object covers. So there's going to be like a function, your fragment shader that gets called, and then you compute, the color of the pixel, or you can tell the GPU discard this pixel, which means, that pixel actually it's not gonna render out. It's just gonna be skipped. Usually, like the way like you could do like intersections is you literally have like the intersection parameterized, for example, by a point. So there's a point in space, and there's like a normal, which defines a plane, like an infinite plane, that kind of goes this way. So when you're computing your pixel, what do you do? Like oftentimes, like in the shader, is like, say you consider pixel here, and you want everything that's on this side of the plane to be cut, and everything that's on this side of the plane, to be to essentially be visible. You don't want like any changes to it. So you take the pixel, and as part of the fragment invocation, you have its position. So you have it's like X, Y, Z, and technically there's like a W, but let's just say X, Y, Z position. And we can actually ignore the Z because like this is already aligned to screen space, so let's just worry about the X, Y. Actually no, you need to kind of worry about X, Y, Z. But for this purpose we don't have to, it's kind of the same principle. So it has X, Y coordinate. What do? You literally take this plane. The easiest way to think about it is you align each point, each pixel that you're rendering, you just align it to the plane, so like it's upwards. So like if you look at this whole thing from the perspective of the plane, you have this point, you have this normal, and this pixel, if you were to like rotate it like this, the pixel's here. So I'm gonna move this here, and the pixel's like right here. And this is actual calculation you can make, where you recalculate the XY position of the point so it's aligned with the plane. And the way you do that is usually you subtract, you first rotate it. So like, it's facing upwards. For that, you can use like a matrix calculation where, we have the plane, you have like, say this is the other axis, and you compute a rotation matrix that essentially rotates this whole thing so this is upwards. And you also offset it by the center, and that way you end up with an XY coordinate where, where'd my brush go? You end up with an XY coordinate where this is like the origin. This is like 0, 0 instead of being an arbitrary position, and then the position of the pixel is gonna be, say like this is say this is 2 and -2. And maybe you have other pixel that's over here. There's another pixel over here. So once you do the rotation matrix, subtract the position, subtract like the center of it, this pixel ends up with coordinate that's 2 and +2. And then you have a very simple logic where you just ask, is the Y coordinate, is it above 0? If it is, discard the pixel, don't render it, which means this pixel gets discarded, and this pixel doesn't, because it's negative. And that's all math there is. Very simple math, very easy to do, like, intersection this way. You can also do some additional effects, because one of the things you can do with intersect shader is, at the intersection, you can make it so like, for example, this glows. And literally the way that works is you say, you essentially interpolate the position. So for example, from between 0 and say -6, you're just gonna, interpolate the color. So like, this would be 0 intensity, this would map to 0 intensity, and this would be 1 maximum intensity, and you map this to a color, and you have your glow that's aligned with the plane. So intersection, very easy. Where it gets complicated is like if you wanted the intersection to close holes, and that's its own whole thing, where it gets really complicated, because now you have to like figure out complex geometry, because you essentially end up like with a hole here, and you have to figure out like, you know, where the hole should be closed, and then you probably have to use something like a compute shader or something. But for intersection itself, the way it is here, very simple, very light. Like there's like GPUs can do this, like, you know, like nothing. It's peanuts to them. There we go. And I got at least one drawing in this episode, and we got 20 minutes. So, but yeah. Hopefully that answers the question. And also we got, you know, the subscription from Tatsu, thank you. Oh, and we got... Oh, thank you, check the Froox out there, also subscribe with Prime, with Bois, thank you.
And also Tatsu donated 100 bits.
Oh my god, thank you, Tatsu. we need to mention trees more often.
And Tyra subscribed to tier 1.
Thank you so much for Tyra. Oh my god, we got this going. Rasmus 0211 is asking, any word on native animated GIF support? It's not really something we have planned right now. It's like one of those things where it's like, it's kind of a weird situation, because like I feel in most cases nowadays like people don't actually use animated GIFs. Even for things they still call GIFs, they tend to be just videos. So it's... The problem with animated GIFs is like, they're a bit different from videos, because like they can do a lot of like weird things where like for example, each frame, instead of fully replacing the previous one like videos do, they can, you know, work additively, where they just kind of like, you know, draw on top, like, but they leave the old stuff, and makes decoding them and like, you know, doing like timeline makes it kind of weird. Also, each frame can take like, you know, different amount of time. It's like they're just kind of weird. Like they don't kind of fit neatly into like, you know, the video box, but you can sort of think of them as like a video. So it's like, so the question is it worth like, you know, spending a lot of time adding support for them? Because like how much like oftentimes when we kind of think about these features is like, how much benefit do we get for supporting certain features? And supporting animated GIFs, it's like it won't take super long, but also like, you know, I don't think it's like, you know, like a super high priority, because like it feels like it's a very niche thing, and a lot of the times it's just gonna bring a video instead. So it kind of depends, you know, like what do you want to like use animated GIFs for? Yeah, like Rasmus is saying, low priority just for ancient memes. Like one way to support them would be to kind of extract all the frames ahead of time and have like an atlas, but like that's still quite a bit of work. And if you have like a really long one, that's gonna balloon your memory. So yeah, it's one of those things. Like I think it's like one of those things that's just too niche to like spend time on it right now. Unless there's like, you know, big surge, like, you know, a lot of people want it, then we'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, like this is gonna bring a lot of people, this is gonna make a lot of people happy, we'll add the support. But unfortunately, I think it's one of those things where it's like the amount of work required for it to have a proper support, you know, outweighs the utility of it. Yukikon is like, how useful do you think these office hours things are? I know you seem, but are they that productive? Does doing them get you excited to keep working, or is it a drag? Just asking because you do more than anyone else with these. I think they're pretty like useful. Like I do like, you know, talking about like my work, and oftentimes like, you know, I end up like talking about it like, you know, with people in the world, like, you know, in other places and so on. But like, you know, that's kind of isolated, like in its impact, because only few people get to hear it. With these, one thing I've been kind of doing is like whenever we cover a big or interesting topic, I will cut it into its own standalone video, and we've actually got like a lot of good response on those. Like people seem to like, you know, enjoy like having that information accessible. It also gives people material that they can use to refer someone You know, if people are asking about how the performance upgrade is working, like why are you working on the particle system as part of the performance upgrade? Now we have a resource that we can point video to, and it helps a lot. So I think it's one of those things, you know, that helps with, you know, communication with the community. So like there's more transparency, you know, so like, you know, in how things are going, like, you know, why are we doing things the way we are, you know, how things are designed. So it gives, I think it's a good way to, you know, to get a lot of useful information out there. I do enjoy talking about it too. Like I enjoy like answering questions and, you know, spreading the knowledge. And one of the things like I really like doing is just kind of bringing people on the same page with things. So that's one of the reasons I really like, you know, explaining things. It's like I just want people to have the same understanding, you know, things like as I do, like and understand like, you know, why decisions are being made certain way, why you're approaching things certain way, how things are gonna work, because the more you understand, you know, the more powerful you are, because like, you know, the more you know, the more kind of tools you have, you know, in your repertoire to like do all kinds of things. So I do think like they are pretty like productive. And they're definitely not a drag. And it gets me, you know, excited to talk about the features I really want to work on, because one thing that helps is, you know, like if I talk about some features and people also get excited for it, and I'm more excited to work on it, so it does help in that regard as well. I don't know, like what about your side, or like is this a drag?
Is this a drag?
Is this a drag?
No.
There
No,
we
it's
go.
not.
Let me just check the time. We've got 15 minutes left. So at this point, we might not be able to. Well, there's a few questions, but we might be able to take a few more. But if you want your question answered, like, you know, get it in now, because we might run out of time. The next question is from Nukikun as well. Follow up if there's time. Support for SVGs anytime soon. Those are animated too. Anytime. I have a problem with like whenever somebody asks anytime soon, because I don't know what it means. Is anytime soon, you know, is that next week? Is that next month? Is that within the next 6 months? Is that within a year? If you can, please specify what kind of timeline are you thinking, because that kind of makes it a bit easier to answer. But in general, I would say probably no. SVGs are kind of weird, because like there's I feel they like would be more beneficial to support than animated GIFs, but also they're a lot more complicated than animated GIFs. So even supporting static SVGs, they can have, you know, all kinds of effects, because you can have, you know, all kinds of different shapes, but also have effects like, you know, they have like on their own like CSS like system, like you can style them, they can do effects like blurring and so on. So we would need like some kind of library to render them out, but oftentimes those libraries, they're designed, you know, for 2D rendering rather than like, you know, rendering them in 3D space. So supporting them properly, that gets really, really complicated. And then having them animated, that's even harder. So that depends what I mean by support, because we could technically support rendering them into a texture, you know, so they get rendered into a texture and then apply the texture to something. So it's gonna be, you know, kind of like video. The problem is, you know, if you render them out into like texture that's like 2K, and like you do, you know, say put in this, and then like you, oh, I'm being pushed out, and then you like, you know, you look at it like super close, then you're gonna lose, you know, that smoothness of an SVG. Because if you wanted to maintain that smoothness, it would need to be converted to like a geometry. So when you look close, you know, the GPU is still like, you know, filling in all the extra detail. So depending on how the support is implemented, you know, that also affects the complexity. And I think if we wanted to do support in the form it gets rendered into a texture, it's not like, you know, rendered as part of the world, like you just apply the texture or something, you can control the resolution of that. That will be way easier to support, because there's already libraries for that. They kind of, you know, they pretty much do all the heavy lifting, you know, for the rendering, so we don't have to worry about that. But it also like kind of in some ways limits how they can be used. But if that's potential thing you want, you know, that you could find useful, like we could do it. That would be definitely faster. I would say, like, depends how do you imagine the support working. So next question, one last thing. What are next steps in optimization? So the next steps are like right now, photon dust is pretty much like nearly finished. I think there's like a few issues that still need to be resolved. It's been brought out of experimental, so please use it for new creations from now on. I strongly recommend, like, avoiding the legacy particle system at this point. The legacy particle system is going to be removed very soon, so it's just going to go poof, which means the conversion is going to be automatic. Everything is going to automatically be converted to, like, photon dust. Once that's done, I'll be working on the audio system. That's going to be the last big part that needs to be, like, fully moved into Froox engine. And after that, it's going to be the splitting, like, where we're going to be reworking how Froox engine communicates with Unity, and then pull Froox engine into its own process, which is going to finish this kind of major optimization milestone. And from that step alone, I think we'll get like a huge performance boost, because now majority of Froox engine will run with .NET 9. So those are pretty much the next steps you can expect. The audio system is going to happen first, and after that, like, the actual steps to pull out Froox engine are pretty much going to be the next thing to work on. And that's going to finish this kind of odyssey that, like, this part of the performance optimization was. And I think that's going to give us, like, enough of a performance boost that we can kind of focus on other things for a while. There's still a lot of other things that could be done for, performance, like, data model rework, reworking the update system, variable rate updates, adding more multi-threading to things. So there's still a lot of performance that's going to be unlocked. But we can, kind of do these, like, sometime later after, like, we maybe work on the IK, maybe work on the UI, work on some other things. Nukikun, oh, wait, that's the one I just answered. We also got 9 minutes. Nukikun for modular, for both, oh, yeah, sorry, that was part of the question. Pixelnator is asking, what part of the world is virtual reality in, and why are all the cute people from there? Do Tanuki don't know?
That's an emote.
Yeah, I figured. I don't actually quite understand the question.
They're like, what part of the world is virtual reality in, and why are all the cute people?
It's everywhere, wherever you are.
Yeah, it's all around you. It's inside of you.
It surrounds us.
You breathe.
It surrounds us.
It,
It penetrates us. We're making a Matrix reference.
What? Okay.
No, that's Star Wars. That's the Force.
Oh dear.
Sorry, I got my references mixed up.
I'm gonna blow up, man.
You're gonna schnupp it.
I'm gonna schnupp it.
You're gonna schnupp it. No, let's discuss the ramble. We should. But I hopefully that answers that question. Nukikon's asking, I'd like to ask any support vector graphics or HTML pages, but you all don't have time. I mean, a little bit. We have still like 7 minutes. Vector graphics, I mean, that's kind of SVG, like, unless you mean something else. HTML pages, that's its own thing. I feel for that, like, what we want to do first is, like, have, like, video streams. Because with web pages, like, say you want to bring one in, there's not really a way to guarantee it's going to be synced for everyone. But we kind of, our philosophy is to have everything synced for everyone. So the way we would approach it is we would have, like, one user render it, and then, like, synchronize the rendered output to everyone else, so everybody sees the same thing. So that's something I'd like to add, like, but, like, it needs the video synchronization to be implemented, so this is like a prerequisite. Next question is from Nitra. How do the angular velocity modules work for photon dust? So for angular velocity, you need the rotation simulation module. And what it does, it's actually similar to like the position like module. The module, it keeps track of the angular velocity for the particles, and then each frame it modifies the rotation, by that angular velocity. So if your angular velocity, says like, we have a particle, and the angular velocity says it rotates this much around this axis, per second, is just gonna modify that particle's rotation, by that amount each frame. So like if this is, it takes 1 second, it's gonna rotate this much in half a second, this is the full second, in quarter second, and whatever frame like updates it, it rotates it, and over time it kind of accumulates. And angular velocity, it can potentially be changed, it can be modified, which means, maybe it rotates this much, and then like the velocity changes, so it rotates like this way, goes like maybe a little bit this. So, it's essentially just integrating the angular velocity over time on the particle's rotation. So hopefully that kind of explains things. And we got 5 minutes left. Rasmus0211 is asking, admin related, any plans to make it possible to allow use of particle assets or worlds for specified clients with time frame, thing rental props, or worlds? I'm actually not fully sure if I understand, but we do have like a number of like business uses. So if you have like anything like that, send us an email. I think it's like at dialogdocument.com, like we have a form for businesses. Actually, it might be at the resonite.com right now. I don't fully remember. Check both of them. We do have like specific like business email. So like if it's some business use, send us a message. What do you want to do? And we can, have like a chat about it. We do have like, some companies that use Resonite for, a number of different things. So like, it is possible. We just need to know like more details. Yeah. We do stuff like, stuff like some companies, we do like white label licenses as well, where, like kind of like we can remove the Resonite branding, and we make a like very curated experience, like where you open Resonite and it like launches you into a specific world. Maybe it's like a lobby for the company, and from there you can go to, to training applications and so on. So like there's a lot of kind of possibilities. Brewer Prime has been kind of working on a lot of stuff. If you'd like to know more, actually, I would recommend like also asking him about this in his office hours. He'll be able to give you like, a lot of good info on this. Just look at time. Nitra's asking for the Unity split. I'm curious if the object serialization will be a limit for performance. I don't think so. Like, I mean, it depends what I mean by object serialization too, because like there's multiple stages where it happens. Like, you have the real-time serialization, like, when I'm doing this is getting serialized, and being transferred to others, and like, when I'm grabbing this and so on. Then you have like one when you save things, when I save this to my inventory, it gets serialized. This different type of serialization, than like this one. But like, I would say like the saving one, that's heavier, because like the one for real-time serialization, that's designed to be very efficient. So like I think it's very rarely like much of a performance like limitation. Saving it to inventory and just in general for persistence, that's a bit heavier, but it also only happens when you actually save. It doesn't happen every single frame. And with the Unity, like it doesn't really have to do super much like with the Unity split, other than like Froox engine being able to run with .NET 9. There's much better runtime, so the code that does the serialization will now run way faster, so it's gonna be even better,
I don't think they mean the network. I think they mean between Unity. I think they mean like they're talking about like telling Unity what to do. I think is what they mean.
That doesn't use object serialization at all. Like there's no object serialization between Froox engine and Unity, so like that's not really relevant.
Yeah, it's gonna use like shared memory or whatever.
Yeah, it's like Unity like doesn't really get like there's just no serialization happening between like Froox engine and Unity, like not even now. So yeah, that's not gonna affect it or limit it. For the actual communication, like we're gonna use like shared memory, which is like pretty much you can share a big chunk of memory or smaller chunks of memory between like multiple processes, and they each. No, shared memory doesn't require serialization at all. Like you literally, the operating system literally maps the same physical memory region to multiple processes, so each one of them is essentially treated as its own memory, except like multiple processes can like write and read to it, which means like you don't need to do any serialization, you don't need to do any copying. You can literally just share data between the like processes, so we can like fill buffers with stuff and then just like read them out on the other process without having to push them through some pipe or some serialization format or anything. They literally just share a chunk of memory. It's extremely fast, extremely efficient. Each process like treats it as if it was its own memory. With that, like we're pretty much run out of time. So thank you very much, everyone for joining. Thank you, Sarah, for helping me like answer the questions. Thank you, for asking all the cool questions, and generally kind of supporting Resonite, being part of the platform, being part of the community, building cool content, whatever you do, is appreciated. Thank you, I forgot, I lost my train of thought. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening, to me and Sarah ramble for 2 hours. So
Yes.
we'll see you with the next one.
See you around, guys.
Oh wait, is there anybody to raid? I need to figure out raiding. Let's see. Creator Jam. Is there anyone other at Creator Jam? Not like Creator Jam is bad, like they're excellent and they like started with MMC. Actually, that's another thing I should have said. Good luck with MMC. I'm kind of excited, like what everybody's going to be working on and all the cool creations. But I don't want to see if there's anybody else streaming Resonite, because we do like to support, nope, it's just Creator Jam. So Creator Jam's getting raided. If you're a streamer, definitely recommend streaming, around this time, because we will raid you. You're gonna get raided. But you're not streaming right now, so Creator Jam it is. Say hi to Medra for me. So raid Creator Jam. What I'm doing for MMC, I'm just working on like Resonate things. It's like like people are busy with things, and I get like time to work on up things.
Yeah.
Okay. Everyone ready? Say hi to Medra. Wow. Oh,